Welcome into the new look, same as the old look currently, on the beat, searching for a new name live on Tuesdays at 9 p.m. I'm Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. That is Adam Smith, who I will give props to in just a second, Jeremiah Holloway, and my bottom left, I assume it's the same for everybody, and Evan Rogers, of course, bringing in with the lettuce, the hair. Um, Next week, Evan will look substantially different because he caved, and yeah, we're not going to talk about that. Adam Smith, talk to me, brother. You were first here tonight. Folks, I've been working with Adam for however long he's been with Inside Carolina, and I can honestly say I don't think he was ever first anywhere, any press conference. He was the first person in here tonight. So, Adam, welcome, my friend.
Thank you, TA. I appreciate the love after I screwed up your Twitter handle and the IC tweet. I screw the thing up. Next thing I do, I see Tommy's smiling face and he's loving me up. I will take the praise. Might not ever have. Is there some sort of eclipse going on outside? I don't know.
Yeah. It might be my head. This is why you save your hair, Evan. You know, you don't cut it voluntarily. Jeremiah, what's going on, man? It's another year we got going on here.
What's going on, y'all? Definitely blessed to be here for another year, my second at IC. So, looking forward to that. I do have to give Adam credit as well. I do remember another time where he was first. He actually bailed me and Jim out a little bit. That could be a story for me. We were up in DC, man. There was a little oversleeping situation, and he kind of helped out with that. So we could get into that another time. But
thank you, Jeremiah. I forgot all about that.
Yeah, it was crazy. Something made me think about it the other day. I was like, wow, that really happened. But glad to be back and glad to talk about some UNC football, man.
Absolutely. Evan Rogers, you got some Manti Te'o type discussion going on in the chat from Gene Triplehorn. What's going on, my friend? You're year two as well with Inside Carolina.
Yeah, year two, man. The takes are just going to get hotter year two. I'm going to cut the conspiracy. I'm getting my hair trimmed, like a little trim. It's not getting chopped off. So middle part will still be there. I just have a little too much going on in the back. So, Gene, I'm getting it trimmed, and my girlfriend is real.
You're getting you're getting the party in the back cut off.
Yeah, that was a summer fun thing. I mean, it's business now. We got football already in full swing. Basketball is going to be here before we know it. So, got to get back in the business.
Dude, slow time down. Please slow it down. Let me sort of tell people what we're going to do. Last year on this show, we tried to do quotes. We tried to talk stories and all. And these shows ran a good while. And shout out to the hardcore folks that join us every week. You guys are amazing. I see a lot of the same names. And I know that everybody here appreciates the follows, appreciates the enjoyment. I'll say this. I talked to a ton of people in Minnesota last weekend while these two plus one back in Chapel Hill working, and everybody's loving on Inside Carolina and everything that everybody puts out, both written and podcast form. So shout out to the fans. It's all about the fans. But what we're going to do here is we're going to have clips, and we're going to focus on one topic. For the most part, there's two this week, just simply because what happened Thursday warrants it. But we're going to focus on one main topic. So what we need is you, the listeners, to name the show. It's currently on the Beat Live. We're going to change it to something different. There's people on the message boards now. UNC Dad, I'll be honest with you. You are in the lead in my mind with your suggestion. I'm not going to spoil it for folks. You can go to Inside Carolina's message boards. But we've got to start with Max Johnson going down in game one. Connor Harrell named the starting quarterback. And we heard from him. If you've listened to Inside Carolina interviews, you've heard from him today. But I'm going to play a clip from Mack Brown because I think it's very relevant to the folks that are a little bit worried about what North Carolina's offense is going to look like. And I'm going to see if I can do this accurately and play it. Guys, we'll come back and talk about it after it's done.
It'll change some. The thing that, and let me make sure that I say this so everybody can understand it. If you can't run the ball and you had a great day passing, it is really hard to fix that. Because if you're soft, you're soft. And you can't just say, okay, let's run the ball better. If you didn't throw the ball as well as you need to, some of it's scheme, some of it's who you targeted, some of it will be game plan, but you can fix a passing game a lot better. If you think about Connor, he was the player of the year, Gatorade player of the year in Alabama. He was 25-2. He won 2 state championships. He's valedictorian of the high school. He's one of the leading guys on our leadership committee. These kids absolutely love him. He's one of the top students in our business school. I've never seen a better kid that tries any harder. His mom called to get Max's number because they wanted to call him, and they're just unbelievable how good these people are. They're just a wonderful family. So all of us need to rally around Connor and step up because he's really good.
Adam, I'll get in here with you first. A couple things he talked about, and I think we need to just briefly hit this. You can fix the passing game much easier than you can fix the run game because when you're soft, you're soft. I've heard Mack say that. Not necessarily publicly, but he's talked about being soft more this year, and I'm not really feeling that this Carolina team is soft. But what do you think about Mack's comments about Connor Harrell? Because right now, he's the guy.
He is the guy, and yeah, Mack. I happened to catch. I think it was a UNC football video they put out from the rewind of the Minnesota game. Mack was getting pretty fired up at halftime. I don't know if y'all saw that or not, but he was in there just kind of letting them have it. And I mean, I have a lot of thoughts. I will try to condense them. I know it's kind of crazy to say considering the relative inexperience of Connor Harrell. I know he started one game. He started the bowl game last year, and there were the 2 interceptions. He had an ankle injury early in that game that sort of limited. It wasn't a spectacular debut by any means for him as a starter, and it sort of it was sort of qualified with the fact that, oh, by the way, the reason he's starting is because Drake May has gone to the NFL. But I tend to think, and it's funny you mentioned the message board. I know there's some people on the message board. Some guy was telling me that I was Max Johnson's publicist or something during the preseason when we were saying that every indication we had was Max would be the starter. I don't know what he or she or they were talking about on that one, but I feel like Connor Harrell's ceiling is pretty dang high. Now, where is he in terms of climbing to reach that ceiling? Probably a long way away. But I feel like with his athleticism and his speed, his ability to run, he is a small dude. He has small hands, which, NFL scouts obsess over. But he does have a big arm. He can throw the ball a long way. I don't know if accuracy is his greatest strength, but I just feel like there's a lot of tools you can work with there with Connor Harrell. Will he look like, Kyler Murray is who Evan is used as an example? Will he look like Kyler Murray on Saturday against UNC Charlotte? I don't think so, but I don't know. I feel like, obviously the Max Johnson injury was terrible and devastating, but I just sort of feel like it 100% is his now. It is his to take. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder. There are no qualifiers. There are no time limits. There are no caveats. I think that there's a lot to like about Connor Harrell, and it's going to be a work in progress, obviously.
Got a lot of trash in the comments. I don't know if you guys can see them. I've been deleting some. If y'all can't come into the comments and not talk what you're talking, just get out. I mean, it's ridiculous. Jeremiah, let's talk about Connor Harrell and not some of the trash that, I assume they're grown folks that act like that. It's not surprising in this world we live in currently. Anyway, I digress. One concern that Adam mentioned for me for Connor Harrell is the turnovers. Jeremiah, he came in the game Saturday or Thursday and put the ball on the turf, and could have been a huge game. That could have changed the game. Max Johnson, we know we had talked about his turnover issues. He put the ball, Carolina recovered it. Harrell comes in, puts the ball and recovered it, and Carolina recovers it. That can't happen that can't be winning football. And that's something I think that you can really control, even maybe better than accuracy or whatever. Anyway, what do you think, Jeremiah?
Yeah, when you look at Thursday's game, that was one with very limited possessions, very limited offensive possessions for both teams, as evidenced by UNC's 17-play, 8+ minute drive in the third quarter. You have to understand, Minnesota only had, I think, 3 plays. Well, really, it was a 3 and out. They only got to do a 3 and out in that third quarter because of how slow that game was and because of how methodical that third quarter was, and how methodical UNC was, with their offense. And the reason I bring that up is because UNC's in a position where they can chew clock this year, and they're going to have to really resort probably to doing so. The fact that you have Amari Hampton, you've seen what he can do. Obviously last season with the 100+ yard rushing games, and he even opened up this season with a 100-yard rushing game as well. When you look at a guy like Connor Harrell, someone who doesn't have a ton of starting game experience at the college level, he's been within the program, but not necessarily live in games, and certainly not as a starter as well. But at the same time, yeah, I know it's crazy. But at the same time, he does know the offense. Like, he spent time in it. One thing that I thought was an interesting point that was brought up today in the player availability was the fact that he did, over the course of the spring and the fall, since he was competing with Max Johnson, he also did have time to split preparation time, if that makes sense, as a starter, in practice, and kind of carry himself in that way. So I think mentally, he might go into that situation, understanding what it is and understanding that responsibility, but to the point of, obviously protecting the ball. That's going to come down to, obviously, what is your connectivity with the receiver. Guys are familiar, but you also have to make sure that you're, getting them, or really from a play calling standpoint, you have to make sure that you're, putting guys in position to where they can get open. Like, if you look at the way that the targets were set up the other night, you have 4 targets going to tight ends. You had 6 going to running backs, if you include the one that Barlow had. And then you had 10 going to receivers, but 8 of those were to J.J. Jones. So you have to find ways to, get those guys open and get those guys in space. And then obviously, if all those fails, this is a team that's, pretty committed to, to running that football. So I think that's a valid, concern. How well can he protect the ball? But I think as well, for UNC, it's like, what are the things they can do, to move the ball down the field and really control time of possession?
Yeah, I heard most of what you said. Y'all saw the chat going on. Evan, get in here. You've called him a Kyler Murray-esque type person. What I'm going to end up doing is turning the comments off, so it just ruin it for everybody else. But maybe that's what other people want to see happen. But yeah, I'll just turn them off. Anyway, Sean Crawley, you're right. I used to play the heck out of those old Atari games. I know how to use it. And there's another one. This is ridiculous. All right, Evan, talk to me.
Yeah, let me clarify the Kyler Murray comment. I was comparing Thomas Castellanos to Kyler Murray just because of the size. Castellanos is listed at 5'9", and he looks all part of 5'9" for BC. But it's important to bring that guy up because I actually think the most interesting part about Mack's whole Connor comments in that whole clip is the idea of, if you didn't pass the ball, maybe it was a scheme, or maybe you weren't throwing to the right guys. Because this is something I told Adam and Jeremiah today. I don't know if they play called or schemed up that first half entirely well for Max when he was in the game. I thought a lot of their passes were to the boundaries and to the outside. They were slow developing, or they were slow developing post or crossers. And this is a guy in Max Johnson who's had a tendency to hold the ball on too long and throw off his back foot when he gets pressured. And those are the kind of routes that play into that. And before Max got hurt in that third quarter, they found some success with some quick hitters. They did a wide receiver tunnel screen with Hamilton. They did a tight end screen with Jake Johnson. They did some quick curls to J.J. Jones and Bryson Nesbitt over the middle. And I hope that they kind of see that and use that same approach when looking at Connor this week, and that, get some RPOs or shift the pocket in and out, or do some boots or some naked boots with a guy who's shown the ability to be athletic in space. If you're playing to your strengths, as they all like to say, it's obviously one, you're handing the ball off to Martin Hampton because he's by far the most proven and experienced and just most talented player on this offense. But you don't want Connor Harrell sitting in the pocket as a pocket passer. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's 6'1" maybe, and he's got an offensive line that's humongous minus Willie Lampkin. So get him outside of the pocket, get some RPO action, get some underneath stuff, some of the slot receivers or those tight ends. Chip Lindsey had mentioned just because of the nature of the game and how that was, heavy personnel, 12, 13 from Minnesota and UNC, that some of those snaps were cut down by those slot receivers. I think Nate McCollum ended up playing 17 snaps. That's the fewest snaps he's had. I'm going to take out it's the fewest snaps technically he's had since the App State game last year, when it was his first game coming back from that hamstring injury he had in the preseason. And he was kind of on a pitch count. So, I don't know if that game can really count for that, just because he did come in, still working his way back from injury. But if you look even further than that, that was the least amount of snaps he's had since 2021 at Georgia Tech. So second year of college. And that's a guy, I think, if you just get some short crossers or some short drags over the middle to kind of loosen Connor Harrell up, I hope they kind of go away from some of these slow developing passes to the outside. I know, JJ had that one good catch on the sideline, but those are just tough throws, and they sometimes can be slow developing, especially if you're throwing to the opposite sideline. So that's what I think, this coaching staff needs to do coming into this week is look at that third quarter where Max, I think, hit his first 5 or 6 passes. And it wasn't because they were, necessarily great passes or anything or high difficulty passes. It's just because they were playing to his strengths. They were getting quick outs. They were getting bubble screens. They're doing top screens and kind of using that same approach with Connor.
Agree with everything you guys said. It's going to be – they were not prepared for Connor to play against Minnesota, clearly. All of this talk, and I'm going to move on, all of this talk here, the bowl game looked much better until he got hurt. So that tells me that they can scheme up something for him to run it. I'm still curious as to how they handled the targets and certain people playing during the bowl game. But now with a full complement of players that Connor gets to play with, I think it'll be something to watch. And I think they need to do it. They need to let it loose. I know people say, well, you don't want to show too much against teams like Charlotte or Central, but you got to see what this guy can do. And Charlotte's got some players. They're not terrible. They lost to JMU, but they've got some athletes that can cause some problems. But you have to see what Connor can do before you go to Duke, before you play the rest of these teams. Because if he's not ready then Carolina is going to be in trouble. And maybe Evans under on the season win total actually is in play again. I did not think it possible. Anyway, flip the sides of the ball. I think last year we saw what Carolina did against South Carolina, and we all thought, holy smokes, this defense is back, baby. And then we saw how the season played out. Well, they had a heck of a ball game against Minnesota as well up there, and Javari Ritzie was the man. He played like a guy that I'd not seen before, maybe except 1 or 2 snaps a game, and I think we all can agree on that. 3 sacks. Jeff Collins had a lot to say about him. The defensive line is where we have preached all year that this was huge. I think it might even be bigger than quarterback. Ritzie did his part on Thursday night. Here's Collins on Monday.
Yeah, I thought he put on a show Thursday night. He's got tremendous ability. He's a tremendous young man. And I was so happy for him that the production matched how awesome I know that he is, right? And I'm wearing my little Javari Ritzie shirt today, little J5 for him. He had a heck of a day. Universally loved on the entire team, and was just really proud that the production matched his work ethic and matched his ability. And that's a cool thing. And now the challenge is, let's do it again. And then let's do it again, and that kind of progression.
Adam, I'm going to come to you first again because we've been around a long time watching Carolina football, and we've talked about guys getting off the bus and looking great. That's basically what Collins is talking about right there. His production matched what you see this guy look like and this guy's work ethic. He balled out. Is this the Ritzie we can expect? Or Is this something else? Or is this Jeff Collins being the one that unlocks these dudes?
I mean, do you want me to be? I'm usually so positive. You want me to be a bummer here? And I would say that Jahvaree Ritzie's history doesn't suggest that he's going to have 3 sacks against Charlotte. But I'm a believer in Jeff Collins, and I'm a believer in what I think the way he's got those guys playing. And I think it was maybe Gene Triplehorn in the chat or my guy George Jenkins that said, could you imagine Gene Chizik wearing an NIL shirt? All due respect to Gene. But no, I could not imagine Gene Chizik lifting up his hoodie and, there being a Cedric Gray, NIL shirt under there or something like that. I think that along with the scheme, along with the aggressiveness, I think the attitude that Jeff Collins has brought this group is important. And I think that some of the creativity that you saw, and Evan and Jeremiah and I were talking about it today. I mean, there were plays where, it wasn't like Jahvaree Ritzie was, throwing guys out of the way like Reggie White and getting back there and just, absolutely wreaking havoc like a wrecking ball. But there's the one play where Stick Lane comes in and just blew up. Like, I think the running back was picking up a blitz, blows up that side of the play. The play sort of gets flushed the other way. And there's Ritzie, for a sack. I thought that he was opportunistic, but also he played the best game of his life in college. And for UNC football fans, they've been waiting for Jahvaree Ritzie. They've been waiting for Travis Shaw. I mean, they've been waiting for stuff like this for a long time from these guys who had such big reputations coming out of high school. And I did think, and Jeremiah wrote about it, and guys go check it out on Inside Carolina. I thought it was a beautiful moment after the game up in Minneapolis, which it was, God knows what time it was. It was like 1 a.m. maybe. And Ritzie was the last guy in the post-game presser, because he's out there. Everyone knows what a kind of relationship he has with his mom. I think he said his god auntie was there. There was all sorts of women, in his family there, just loving him up before he came in to talk to us. Yeah, I mean, if he sustains it, it's the same deal we got from last year. What was it? One of our good friends said, if they can just get 9 sacks a game, they should be okay. Sure. If Jahvaree Ritzie can just get 3 sacks a game, he'll have 39, assuming they go to a bowl. But yeah, the unlocking, I think, is that's the key word there, Tommy, because, I believe the way that Jeff Collins is calling this defense, I believe that we will get to see the best of Jahvaree Ritzie. I know Des Evans statistically didn't do a dang thing in terms of numbers.
Don't go there. That's
Sorry.
my next.
Is that the next one? Oh,
I've got that teed up.
Okay, we'll come back to that. I will hush. I will hush and pass it off to whoever's next.
I'll let Jeremiah get in here. Yeah, I mean, is it real or is it a mirage? And if it were last year, knowing what we knew about the aforementioned former DC, I would say, show me more. But watching for me, I don't think you can just turn it on like that and it get turned off easily. But like Colin said, the key is getting him to do it again, Jeremiah.
And I think what Jeff Collins said actually applies to the whole team, even though he obviously wasn't there last year. This is a new defense and a new scheme. But this is what I think about when I think about last year's South Carolina game versus this year's Minnesota game. I personally, and some people may agree with this, some people may disagree with this, I thought South Carolina was going to be a little bit better last year than what they ended up being. So going into that South Carolina game, though, seeing the way that they played, I knew 9 sacks probably wasn't going to be the mark, but it was like, okay, they played a South Carolina team that did some stuff the year before, so maybe that maybe there's some potential there. Not necessarily falling for the fool's goal, but it's like, okay, maybe this is a better defense. And then as the season went along, they kind of started to trail off. But this year, I am more in a state of, let's kind of see where they go with it, because we did see them play a Minnesota team last year that, obviously had Darius Taylor, who played well. And so they didn't even have him this time around. And then I think they did have, they were better at quarterback in that first half. I thought Minnesota probably controlled things more. But I kind of say that to say, like, schematically, the defense absolutely looked different. And I think a byproduct of that ended up being, the type of game that Ritzie was able to have, because he felt, and he even said this when we talked to him after the game, he felt he could, fly around and play a little bit more free. Players were saying that all throughout camp, that they could fly around and play, more free. So now I think it's just a matter of, can you continue that, style of play against teams that maybe have a more fortified run game, or teams that may have they don't play a ton of elite quarterbacks necessarily this year, but they definitely play some some solid ones. So I think the main thing that I'm going to look for is, like, can they sustain that style of play, which I think, honestly, I think this style of play fits the players on this team a lot better than their style of play last year. Like, I think they have some athletes on that team that can really kind of do some stuff if you let them and if you afford them the opportunity. So I think looking at these next 3 games, it's going to be less about necessarily the stats. Obviously, you want to hold some of these next few teams to low points per game and things like that. But when it comes to, like, a sack total, maybe you don't look at necessarily a number. Maybe you just look at, okay, this is a UNC defense that, they're moving around and things like that. And then one thing before I sign off, something that Mack and Jeff Collins were talking about today or yesterday was, kind of making sure that the missed tackles get, addressed as well. Because when you are moving around that fast, sometimes, maybe technique gets lost and things like that. So that's another thing to kind of watch out for, as they, figured this out and figured this new defense out. But I feel like the style works really well. I feel like Jahvaree Ritzie's performance was a byproduct of that new style. And I think now it's just, once they get into ACC play, does that style, translate against some of those other teams?
Yeah, I liked your point about the tackles, and I also thought it was interesting, and folks can go back and listen to the Collins thing before I let you run with this, Evan. Collins talked specifically about, somebody asked about Caleb Lavallee's missed tackle. He addressed it specifically, what he did wrong, how you fix it, and it wasn't just, oh, we missed too many tackles or things like that. There were specific things that were going on, and I think Collins' attention to detail, I mean, his energy is ridiculous. I'd stroke out if I had the energy that guy had, but his attention to detail is something that can be overlooked. And the players, while they're playing free, that to a man they've all mentioned, they also have a much more attention to detail, I feel like, to the jobs they do. That'll be relevant in the quote I've got coming up next. But Evan, talking about Ritzie, I mean, I saw his mom, I believe it was his mom, post game, and she was extremely happy with the way her son played, as was every Carolina fan there.
Yeah, I really like this comparison between the South Carolina game last year and the Minnesota game, just because it's a very similar narrative. And what came about from that game last season was, obviously, UNC's defense declined in terms of performance, but that South Carolina offensive line stunk. I mean, they were terrible. It was a line that was pieced together. In the story I wrote on Jeff Collins yesterday, that South Carolina offensive line was 118th nationally in sacks allowed and 128th in rushing yards per game. They were terrible. They were one of the worst statistical offensive lines in the country, regardless of FCS, FBS. Minnesota, on the other hand, is probably one of the better offensive lines UNC is going to go up against this season. They got a left tackle who's a projected first rounder by some mock drafts, Ursary. And then both of the offensive guards were actually top 20 interior lineman prospects on some big boards. So they've got 3 legitimate guys who are projected to be drafted in the NFL next year. And yeah, I mean, Ritzie had a career game, 3 sacks. He more than doubled his career total in one game. And I think he graded out around a 72 in Pro Football Focus. He didn't have a game last year higher than 63 all season. So this was a career game for him, and it's interesting to see if he can keep up that production. I went back and dug just to see of the last 12 years, because it's been since the 2012 season that UNC has had a first-team All-ACC performer on the interior defensive line. So one of the defensive tackles, that was Sylvester Williams. And since that point, they've had 3 other guys be All-ACC, the last guy being Miles Murphy in 2021. Just crazy to think about just how his kind of career ended up being after that. But all that to say, it's been a really long time, and it's been very rare that UNC has a game changer on the interior defensive line. And with how Jeff Collins approaches defense with the aggressiveness, bringing blitzers off the edge, bringing safeties down, bringing a linebacker and then pulling out that rush into coverage, if you can have a guy in that interior defensive line really step up and be dominant like Ritzie was, I mean, that really changes the ceiling of what this defense could be. I mean, it's funny to think coming into the year, I think we all thought the secondary was really good and we had a lot of question marks about the defensive line. And I know it's only one game, but the defensive line looked honestly a lot better than the secondary at times. I mean, Huzzy had a pretty good game, but you could say Marcus Allen struggled both in coverage and tackling. Stick Lane had his tackling issues. Same with Dooley, who played in limited snaps. So it's going to be big. I mean, there's some big names on that defensive line who haven't lived up to their billing to this point, and Ritzie definitely did that one night. And if he can continue that for the rest of the season, that could be huge for this defense.
Indeed it can. Javari Ritzie with a career night. Like Colin said at the end of that, the key is doing it again. Carolina will get that opportunity against Charlotte on Saturday. Let me talk about Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Just in case folks don't know who I'm talking about, I'm going to put it at the bottom. Johnny T-Shirt, a sponsor of this podcast and a great place to get all your all your Carolina swag. We need to work that out. We need on the beat shows, or whatever we're going to call this, show shirts. You can go to them on Franklin Street. You can go to them. If you're in town, you got 3 weeks at home games to come to Chapel Hill. Go see Johnny T-Shirt in person. If you can't get there, go see him online, johnnytshirt.com. Inside Carolina sent you. You get 10% off your order. It's a great time to be an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber, and you get a 10% off that order. You spend as much money there as I do, you make that money back. I mean, it's like gold when you go to Johnny T-Shirt and get a discount. Also, second sponsor is Congruity. Check out this. Go to matt@congruityhr.com. You see it on the bottom of your screen. Small to mid-sized people. Look, Evan, this is a new look show, man. I'm trying to get all hip here. If I can't say it right, at least you can see it right. matt@congruityhr.com for your free assessment for your small to mid-sized business. They are great customer service folks. They grow your business. They're local, grew to national. Your small business, you can be local, you can grow to national. Just don't forget the small people that sent you to matt@congruityhr.com for your assessment. National Guys Pay the Bills on the audio version. We're back with whatever you guys name this show here in a second. All right, guys, we're back. That's Adam, Jeremiah, Evan. They're tired of listening to me talk. So let's listen to Jeff Collins talk about Des Evans. After the game, I got on the Inside Carolina message boards and I talked to people. And all I heard was Des Evans did not have a stat. He did not scratch the stat book other than snaps played in the game against Minnesota. So what I try to do at these press conferences, when I'm not giving you guys live updates while these guys work, I'm asking the question that everybody wants to ask. So I asked him. I can't even remember how I said it, but basically, Evans didn't scratch the stat book. How did he play? Collins looked at me like I didn't know what I was talking about, but I was asking the question that everybody wanted to know the answer to. Here it is.
Evans,
yes,
was amazing.
That's what
He was just a complete destruction of what they were trying to do. There's a couple times that he's the one, Des Evans was the one that forced the tackle for loss, or he was the one that forced the sack, or he was the one that made them check to run away from him. I thought Des played really well. And I know people want to talk about production and the stat lines, and Ritzie's very well deserved, right? He had production, he had stat lines, But what Des Evans did, what Bo Atkinson did, the other internal guys along the defensive line, they were ones that were making plays based on the nature of what we do. Other guys make plays. And so I thought Des played great.
That's it, folks. That is the key to watching football, and these guys can agree with me. I hope they do. It doesn't matter what numbers you put up. If you're a defensive lineman, your job is to do exactly what Des Evans did. Sure, you want to see a guy built like that with that kind of talent make sack after sack. But if he's doing what Jeff Collins described, this defense can be really good. Adam, I'll let you get the final word on Des. You've been covering him for 4 years. I've seen him for 5 or 6 when he was at Lee County. You always hear the prototypical size. He looks like, Jason Staples will say, he looked like he built in a lab and all that. And yeah, he's probably not going to get to the sack total, or maybe he will, that Gregory Hall talked about 3.5 years ago. But as long as he plays like that, Adam, this defense is different than we've seen in multiple years.
I'm just scrolling the comments and enjoying the name suggestions. I got stumped on one. Is Girl Math a name suggestion for the show? Welcome to Girl Math. No, I'm kidding, Cat Mom. Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. I wasn't sure where we were going with that one, but I mean, no, I don't think Dez. It wasn't the Gregory Hall prediction. Dez's season sack total. Yeah. I think he had him for 10 sacks coming up that one year.
I think it was his sophomore year, maybe.
And he had 0, I think. I don't know that Dez is ever going to have 10 career sacks. God bless him. In a UNC jersey, maybe he will. But it's interesting. What I was thinking about with Dez as you're talking and setting that up is, I personally needed Jeff Collins to sort of lay that out for me, because it's such a different vibe when you're like the three of us here and you're covering those games, as opposed to maybe watching them on TV with the benefit of replay, with the benefit of maybe a better angle. I didn't see much from Dez the other night because he was setting the edge. I went and looked. Just in my mind, watching it live, I thought Bo Atkinson played really well. I thought Joshua Harris played really well. I thought Travis Shaw played well for when he was in there. And then I went and looked. Bo Atkinson, I think, is credited for 1 tackle. Joshua Harris is credited for 2 tackles, although I thought Josh Harris was taking on 2 blockers at a time. So it's kind of interesting. What I'm trying to say is, like, you watch it and you think, this guy played well, maybe this guy didn't do much. And then you look at the numbers and, like, yeah, they had Bo for 1 tackle when I thought Bo played really well. I know he didn't play a ton of snaps. I think if Des Evans is willing to do these things, like set the edge, I think it's going to be a really nice season for the UNC defensive line. I know we may be prisoners of the moment here. I hope we're not overreacting. But, I feel like you got to have a lot of momentum coming off that game. And it'll be interesting to see what you do. You got these 3 home games now before the ACC start. I was thinking earlier that the schedule really sets up nicely for a Connor Harrell to try to settle in at quarterback. I mean, good Lord, UNC defense coming off 5 sacks, gave up 15 yards rushing in the second half to Minnesota. I hope we're not setting the bar too high for them, but I feel like there's a ton to like.
Yeah, Jeremiah, I'm going to let you come in here and get a final thought on this show. It's been a fun one. It's been a different one, but I'll let you get a final thought. And then, Evan, you can close us out, man, since everybody seems to be liking the young guy on the chat. We might have to put you in the background and blur the page when you talk so people will get off the Evan love. But, Jeremiah, what you got? Close us out.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued to see what UNC does. Not necessarily what UNC does these next 3 games, but how they do it. Like, I think these next 3 games, they're games that they should win. But I'm interested to see, can they – this is what I wanted to say earlier, now that I think about it. I thought that last week was an opportunity to maybe get some of those tight ends involved, a little bit more. Obviously, Nesbitt it was 3 targets. He ends up getting 2 of them. Obviously, one was intercepted. Max was able to complete a pass to his brother, actually. So Jake Johnson ended up getting 1. But I'm interested to see specifically with Bryson Nesbitt, because I feel like he's such a unique asset. Obviously, he's a all ACC player, so I'm really interested to see if that's something that they're able to do. One thing that they were talking about was creating more explosive plays. How much has Nesbitt involved in that? And honestly, can you get the wide receivers, more involved into the game plan when you do look to air it out? Obviously, like I said earlier, this is a run first, a primary, rushing offense, and we understand that, and that's the identity that they've began to buy into. But how can you take advantage of Omari's production in the backfield to open things up down the field? So I think that's going to be something that, and again, these are games that they should win, but I'm interested to see what they do specifically in regards to that, to kind of get some of those guys open and create more plays in that passing game when they need it. Because there's games on that schedule, especially some of those road games, where they're really going to need that. So I'm interested to see the next steps they take in that direction.
I agree there as well. A lot of good names coming in. You guys need to get on the message boards and put them down because I can't keep up with them. Jax Dodge, you submitted a ton. I appreciate it. I'm trying to go through them. I'll look at them. Evan, I'll give you the final thought, and I'll add this question for you. What are we talking about in the Bowls lot on Saturday that we're going to see after Carolina's had a week to prepare for a Charlotte team with Connor Harrell taking full reins? Go with that where you will. Hit it.
Yeah, 2 quick points. I want to hit on the Des thing real quick about sometimes it's not about the player, it's more so who they're playing against. So Minnesota did a lot of quick passes with Brosmer just because that's his strengths. And they ran a lot of inside runs because that's just kind of the PJ Fleck mentality. So when you have those two things, it's tough for a edge rusher to, quote unquote, get stats up just because there's not opportunities to get sacks because there's not those long developing pass plays that open the door for him. As far as this week and the next 3 weeks, it's something I told Adam and Jeremiah today in relation to Max Johnson versus Connor when they were in camp kind of battling for the starting job. And it was something Mack, I think, actually mentioned in his press conference as to why UNC ended up choosing Max, or one of the reasons, or the main reason they ended up choosing Max to start that game at Minnesota was because of the experience factor, and that Max had the experience over Connor. And I firmly believe that UNC thought, and I think this is a valid thinking process, that they needed Max Johnson to win that game at Minnesota because it was a road game against a Big Ten team in a hostile environment. Who knows how hostile it really was after the delay, but the thought process is it's going to be a tough environment for a guy like Connor to get his second, career start at. I also think, in my personal opinion, that UNC needs dynamic quarterback play to beat some of these opponents they have later down the schedule. I think they're going to need a dynamic quarterback to beat NC State. They're going to need one to beat Florida State, even though I know Florida State hasn't started on the right foot. They're going to need one to beat Georgia Tech and Boston College even. And I think the dynamic quarterback on this roster before Max got hurt, and it's a terrible situation that it's come to this, was Connor Harrell. And with that, I think this offense changes completely. I think you needed a quarterback who took the pressure off of Marion Hampton so that defenses couldn't stack the box with 8 or 9 guys. And you slowly started seeing Minnesota really, really, stack that box heavily. That first drive in the third quarter, when it kind of gets off the rails there in the red zone, is when they try to run a read option with Max and Omarion, and Max keeps it, and he gets no gain. And then the next play, they do a quick pitch to Omarion Hampton, and it goes for a loss of 3 to 4 yards because Minnesota could just cram the box because they knew Max wasn't really a running threat. He couldn't really extend a defense. He couldn't stretch them out. And then you see Connor come in late and, have that read option RPO action, and he kind of stretches Minnesota's defense out, and it's the biggest play of the game when he throws it to J.J. Jones. So I think that's what they've got to do with Connor. They have to kind of switch up their playbook entirely because they've talked about how Chip Lindsey has done a good job of putting in 2 different offenses or making it aware that there are going to be 2 different offenses that play to the strengths of Max and Connor clearly has different strengths than Max does. I would really like for them to, like I mentioned earlier, just move the pocket around, do some RPOs or some bootleg actions, and really just focus on the underneath stuff. Connor has a big arm. I don't know if it's the most accurate one at times, but he does have a capable and a big arm. And yeah, like Jeremiah said, it's more so how these wins come about these next 3 weeks than the wins themselves. Of course, you want to win at the end of the day, but if you're looking at the season long term and what this team could potentially be, if you see a UNC team that comes out and plays really well, I mean, maybe those 8-9 wins are a possibility, even with, technically your backup quarterback.
Yep. Great show, boys. It's not about whether they win or not. It's about playing to the Carolina standard. How many times have we heard that in the last 2 weeks, covering these press conferences and being around them? We're going to find out what the Carolina standard is over the next 3 weeks against Charlotte, Central, and James Madison. But this crew will be back next Tuesday night, hopefully in a more family-friendly live chat, and maybe with a new name. Keep going to Inside Carolina on the premium message board, putting your suggestions for team or show names in there. Shout out to Adam, Jeremiah, and Evan. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. It's been fun. If you're in the Bowls lot, Inside Carolina Live in the Bowls lot, I believe at 12:30 we start. And I'm actually going to get to be on there for the first hour with Joey. Evan will be down there. I'll be the guy in the back sitting down because I'm old. But go shout out everybody in the Bowls lot. Adam and Jeremiah, of course, will be on the coverage. Later in the week, we've got the game plan Thursday night with Greg Barnes, Jason Staples, and myself. Maybe a show with Greg and I, maybe a next level, maybe some Scott Forbes action coming later in the week as well. Just a ton going on at Inside Carolina. Get ready for it. Subscribe, like, everything else. Thanks, fellas.